I'm going to show you a diverse range of pencil and graphite supplies that will greatly improve your drawings. I'll explain drawing pencils, erasers, pencil extenders, blending tools and paper, fixative, and a supply that I thought was going to be really fun, but was not. I find these graphite sticks to be absolutely essential. This is a Cretacolor 8B. For some reason, this feels too big. I strongly prefer these graphite sticks. This one is not a square, it's a little bit flatter, and for some reason, I just find it a little bit easier to grip. But it comes down to your own personal preferences. I'm pretty particular about the shape of the graphite sticks. This one is more like a square cylinder, whatever those are called. When I'm trying to really dig into the page, these cover so much more space. I really like to get rid of the white of the page as quickly as possible. The best way to do that is with graphite powder. It's absurdly messy. Just make sure you have all of your surfaces covered. I put the graphite powder on the page, and it's really nice if you have a foam brush. I probably would get one that's bigger than this, and you can just take the foam brush, brush the graphite powder into the page. You can also use your hand, but I find this is nice in terms of getting a layer of tone that's a lot more even. I really like these pan pastel sponges. They have a very good density to them. They don't feel like they're going to fall apart, but they're also not too hard. A lot of people have asked me about using makeup sponges. The ones that I've tried were actually too hard, but you can definitely do your research, and I'm sure that other makeup supplies might be just fine. These come in different shapes. This one, which is a triangle, is my favorite. It's just a little bit easier to grip. I find that these bigger ones are a little bit harder for me to grip, and they're not as flexible. But you can use anything to blend. I know some people use a chamois, your finger, a paper towel. I don't really like using my finger. If I'm doing it a lot, you can rub your skin raw. These are blending stumps. Doesn't matter which brand you get, they're all comparable. The advantage of these is they are very rigid and you can get a really good grip around them. So different than if you're holding a tiny eraser. I use these when I want to do a lot of really aggressive smudging. They're so dense, you don't have to worry about destroying it like I would with a sponge if I press that hard. Some people use these in a very gentle manner. They're very versatile tools that can adapt to however you draw. Not to be confused with a tortillon. I've never known how to pronounce that. The difference is these have a very even tip, whereas the tortillon are spiral wound. I don't like those as much because they're so much smaller that I find them hard to grip. This is nice and dense. Every tool has its own special talent. If you use them all together, that is going to increase the diversity of marks you can build with basically no effort. Drawing pencils come in two different categories. The H pencils are very hard and they're very limited in terms of how dark you can get things. They're very good when you want to do a very, very mild light sketch. They pretty much cannot go dark. B pencils are very dark and very soft, and they go all the way up to a 9B, and I've heard that there's such a thing as a 13B, but I've never found it before. Maybe it does not exist, but I'm dreaming about it. With the B pencils, the larger the number, the softer and darker they get. H pencils, I've seen up to a 6H. These you have to be careful of how hard you press because they're so hard that if you press hard on the paper, the H pencil can actually scratch into your paper. Got to make sure with an H pencil that you have a very light touch. If you're not sure which hardness to try, I think 2B is a good place to begin. It's really when you get to around 5B and 6B that it gets crazy soft and dark. I do recommend if a drawing is all drawing pencils, it is a good idea to sometimes stick with the same manufacturer because every single brand of pencils, sometimes depending on the brand, the color of the pencil can be a little bit more blue. Sometimes that does create enough of a conflict in the color that it becomes a distraction. Test it in advance because you do want to make sure that the colors match. Sharpening your pencil really depends on how you draw. I really don't sharpen my pencils. This pencil I have here, I just carved around it with a utility knife because I really enjoy how blunt it feels. Sometimes a regular old pencil sharpener is great, and I have friends like Kathy Speranza who sharpens them in a way that I imagine would cause a lot of harm. We do often associate a pencil as needing to be sharp, but I do the same thing with colored pencils. I like to have that blunt tip. I strongly prefer these woodless pencils. You can see here there's no wood, and this makes it a lot easier because you can tone in areas very fast by drawing with the side of the pencil. Regular art pencil, all you've got is the tip. This is, again, much more efficient in terms of laying down a lot of pigment. I really like these because they come in super soft versions. When I found a 9B woodless pencil, I was in heaven. These are pencil extenders. You can live without them, but I have many little nubs of pencil sticks lying around, and these just help you use up to the very bitter end of a pencil. I don't think one of these is better than another. I would just try it in the store and see if you like the grip. The kind of paper that you use is going to strongly impact the results that you want. If you're doing quick drawings, drawing in sketch paper is just fine, but if I know that I'm going to be working on a pencil drawing a lot, I try to get a sturdier paper. Mixed media paper works really well. I really enjoy textured paper. This drawing, you can see that slight texture, which gives the drawing a little bit more atmosphere. However, that's a particular look that I'm really trying to get in this drawing, and it may not be a good fit for the type of drawing you want to do. This is the supply I was so excited to try, which is kneadable graphite putty. I was thinking about how incredibly malleable this is, and I could make so many different types of marks with it. It is water soluble, which sounds super fun. It was super crumbly. Every time I tried to make a mark, it would just fall apart. People told me that theirs never crumbled, but if we have a material that's sometimes crumbly and other times is not, that's not a very good reflection on a material for being that inconsistent. I'm sorry, Graphite Putty, never again with you. I have multiple erasers that I use. They vary a lot in terms of their strength. For example, this is a Faber-Castell dust-free eraser. The Staedtler white plastic eraser, these two are almost interchangeable. I do think the dust-free eraser is a little bit softer. I like to call this eraser the bulldozer. It's a very blunt eraser. You can really knock out a gigantic area of highlight, but you can see the tip of it is very blunt. You really can't do details with these. And when you use these erasers, they are not subtle. But to me, it's really important in my drawing that it doesn't get too smudgy. I much prefer to push an eraser into the drawing so I can get a mark that's a little bit more tense. When you blend everything to death, your drawing ends up looking pretty mushy and it lacks the structure that is necessary. I do have this kneaded eraser. However, I don't really use these until I'm almost finished with the drawing because these kneaded erasers, they're really weak and they really cannot do that much for you, especially if your graphite drawing is really heavily built up. I do like that you can sculpt it into a particular form if you're trying to get into a little area, but a kneaded eraser to me is more about subtle lifts. If you have an area of tone and you want to just make it a little bit lighter, that's what you want to use the kneaded eraser for. Eraser sticks are so important in terms of getting a lot of detail. My favorite is the General's Factus BM2 because it has a lot of strength. Even if you're pressing pretty hard on it, it really holds itself up very well, yet it also gets really nice, clean, visible lines. I'm not a big fan of this Tombow eraser pen. It's very thin and it's not very strong. I've oftentimes had trouble getting really clear lines out of this pen. The tip is odd because it's shaped like a rectangle, and it just doesn't make a very consistent line. And it is handy that these both come with refills. Graphite drawings do smudge. If you want to protect your drawing from that, you can use Fixative. There are two kinds of Fixative. This is crystal clear. This is when you're totally finished with the drawing and you don't want to work on it anymore. Some people will use the workable Fixative, and that's where if you're in the middle of working on a drawing and you want to fix it a little bit, that's fine too. And you can continue working on it after you've applied the workable Fixative. Some people use hairspray because it's cheaper than getting the Fixative. I haven't done a scientific study, but I'm guessing this is probably not archival. The thing to know about Fixative, though, is that it will darken your drawing. Other people may not notice, but I definitely notice, and I oftentimes do not put Fixative on my graphite drawings. Usually I'll just put a sheet of newsprint over them and store them in a strong portfolio. One aspect of these supplies is how much physical pressure you're going to put on the drawing. And you can experiment. Really developing a soft, sensitive touch can create beautiful, delicate tones. I'm extremely aggressive with my graphite supplies because I really live for that super rich, deep, dark tone, which I know for some people isn't what they want to do. I do find that graphite does require that physical pressure in order to build up the tone. That can oftentimes be a reason people are struggling with tone.